Henry and the Fox News at Night team take things from here. Ed, we miss you in D.C.
Wonderful show, Laura. Oh, always great to see you.
Have a good show.
Thank you. We begin tonight with the Fox News Alert. New problems for Omarosa Manigault Newman's book, about to be revealed this hour. A Fox News at Night exclusive with Trump 2020 campaign advisor Katrina Pearson. She's about to break some news. In the book, Omarosa claims Pearson confirmed that President Trump used a racial slur. Pearson is here to say not only is that false, but she's going to reveal new information that could poke more holes in Omarosa's story. Information you only hear this hour on this show first. Plus, another high-profile firing in Washington today. The FBI agent at the center of the anti-Trump text controversies is fired. The president says it's about time. But is the firing just for show, or are we about to see some real accountability in the investigation of the investigators? We'll investigate. Hello, and welcome to Fox News at Night. I'm Ed Henry, in again for Shannon Bream. We begin with the latest insider account of the Trump White House. Omarosa Manigault Newman is using former colleagues like Katrina Pearson to make some wild claims about the president. Pearson will reveal that new information I mentioned about Omarosa in a moment. But first, let's go to correspondent Trace Gallagher in our Los Angeles newsroom with the charges and countercharges. Good evening, Trace.
Good evening, Ed. In 3 separate interviews today, including 2 tonight, Omarosa Manigault Newman continues to indicate she has more tapes to release, even saying on MSNBC that Robert Mueller's special counsel office has contacted her. Watch.
Oh, I have plenty.
Anything Mueller would like to see? Robert Mueller?
If his office calls again,
would you be a good witness in this investigation by Mueller?
Absolutely. Anything that they want, I will certainly.
You think Trump should be impeached?
At this point, yes.
And she also continues her contradictions. In her book, she writes, someone told her that during a taping of The Apprentice years ago, Donald Trump used a racial slur. Then she claimed she personally heard it. Now she says he used the N-word multiple times. Watch.
It sounded as if he used it every day. It rolled off his mouth, kind of like when you first heard the Access Hollywood tape. You would never imagine he talked that way. It just kind of rolled off of his tongue.
And breaking tonight, President Trump denies making racist statements and says Apprentice creator Mark Burnett says there are no racist tapes. But Manigault Newman has so far failed to provide evidence of her claims, and yet she also made new allegations about White House Chief of Staff John Kelly firing her. Here's General Kelly and Omarosa in the Situation Room, followed by the allegation. Watch this.
I think it's important to understand that if we make this a friendly departure, we can all be, you can look at your time here in the White House as a year of service to the nation, and then you can go on without any type of difficulty in the future relative to your reputation.
I asked him if I could leave. They told me 4 times I couldn't leave. He wanted to intimidate me. He wanted to put fear in me, and he didn't want anyone to know what they were doing to me in that room.
Earlier today, she said her whistleblower status affords her special protections, and yet tonight she wouldn't answer how she snuck a recording device into the Situation Room because of threats from Trump lawyers. She went on to say she thinks President Trump is in mental decline and that she never signed a non-disclosure agreement in the White House. The president responded several times on Twitter saying, quote, I know the fake news media will be working overtime to make even wacky Omarosa look legitimate as possible. Ed.
All right, Trace Gallagher, appreciate you starting us off. Here now to respond to these latest claims from Omarosa Manigault Newman and maybe reveal some new information of her own, the former spokeswoman for the 2016 Trump campaign, current senior advisor to his 2020 re-elect campaign, Katrina Pearson. She is quoted, or perhaps she'll say misquoted, in Omarosa's new book. Good evening, Katrina.
Good evening, Ed. Thanks for having me.
All right. I appreciate you being here. A lot to unpack. Let me start first with a quote from the book so we can get it from you directly about whether this is true or not. In the book, Omarosa says Katrina had heard from her sources that the tape was of Trump using the N-word. Someone she knew who knew political strategist Frank Luntz told her that Luntz had heard it. Lynn, as in Lynn Patton, a longtime Trump aide, reported she asked Trump about it on the plane, specifically whether it was possible such a tape might exist, and he said no. Then she, Katrina, asked him what he wanted her to do, and he said, put it to bed. Katrina cursed and said, he said it. Did that happen?
No, Ed, that did not happen. It sounds like she's writing a script for a movie. I've already been out there talking about this. That is absolutely not true. I have no sources with that tape. I have no connections to anyone at Celebrity Apprentice other than Omarosa. And in fact, she was the only one that brought this tape up. People that I've checked with, who she's mentioned, have no idea what she's talking about. But you know what, Ed? I'm really not going to be angry about this. Clearly, Omarosa is in a very desperate situation. I really do feel sorry for her. This is obviously trash for cash. I was really concerned with Omarosa when she got married, when she had to buy a fake wedding ring. So I do feel sorry for her, but I will not stand by and allow her to continue to tarnish everyone's reputation and hurt the one person that helped her become who she is in the celebrity world.
Okay, we gave you a chance to respond. I want to get to the new information, but first I want to be clear. You've been around the president during the campaign, since the campaign, since he was elected president. Have you ever heard him use the N-word, any sort of racial slur? Yes or no?
Absolutely not. The answer is no. In fact, the president and his family have been nothing but kind, generous, and respectful to myself and everyone else that I know of color.
Okay, now let's get to the new info. I mentioned Lynn Patton, a longtime Trump aide going back to his business dealings, and then she I believe, had been working at the Housing and Urban Development. She's a longtime Trump advisor inside and outside the government. I understand she's putting out a statement this hour that is refuting these claims. Can you tell us about that?
Oh, absolutely. Look, as I mentioned, Omarosa was the source of this tape. She was concern trolling this tape since the latter part of the campaign, in my opinion, as a tool of manipulation of those around her. And she has been mentioning Lynn Patton's name over the last couple of days on her melodramatic interviews as someone who could actually corroborate what she was saying. And in fact, Lynn Patton has released a statement this evening, and she's given an exclusive that is now,
she saying?
And that is now running in the Huffington Post, who says that that is simply not true. But more importantly, Ed, it's the timeline. The reason why Omarosa is facing a wrath of contradiction is because she can't keep her lies straight. She has gone out there and said that she has not heard the tape until after her book was finalized. Well, what everyone didn't know, and that what Lynn Patton is announcing tonight.
And that's Lynn Patton right there.
And what Lynn Patton is announcing tonight. I just want to be clear. Pardon
me 1 second. Lynn Patton is now saying tonight that on December 12th at 11:30 p.m., she's being very specific, 2017, at 11:30 p.m. in a phone call, she says, Omarosa told her then that she had heard the tape where the president allegedly said the N-word. Significant because now in recent days, Omarosa has said she had not heard it until after writing her book. December 12th, 2017, right. She hadn't written the book and she was still in the White House. That is a big contradiction. Is that what you're understanding tonight?
It's a major contradiction, and it's a bombshell, Ed, because on 2 days after that, on December 14th, she went on an ABC News interview defending the president, saying, quote, that he is not a racist. So how could that be possible if she heard the tape already that she's using as her excuse to change her tone with the president?
Another quick point I want to make. Mark Burnett, a top, one of the creators, obviously, of The Apprentice, the president tweeted tonight that Mark Burnett called him and said no such tape exists. Beyond that, Omarosa today was out there on MSNBC and maybe elsewhere saying that Bill Pruitt, another producer on The Apprentice, is corroborating her story. I understand you have a different story tonight.
Yes, Bill Pruitt was the producer of seasons 1 and 2, where she is claiming that this apparently took place. She also told Lynn Patton that Bill Pruitt was her original source of this tape, and Lynn Patton spoke with Bill this evening and is announcing that that is simply not true. And as I suspected all along, this tape does not exist. Omarosa is just desperate for money.
All right. Last question. You were at her wedding. There are photos of you online, having fun with Omarosa. I know people are friends, and then they break up. And the president hired her well over $100,000 a year in taxpayer money inside the White House. The president in the campaign said he was going to hire the best and the brightest, that he was a businessman. There you are at the wedding. He's had problems now with Michael Cohen as well. A big picture here. You're going after Omarosa hard and attacking her. But But the fact of the matter is,
I'm not attacking her. I'm just stating the facts.
Well, you talked about her ring, and you said that this is trash for cash. You said it was trash for cash, and so I want to be clear. You've been friends with her, and the president hired her to a sensitive White House post, being paid almost $200,000 a year in taxpayer money. That was a mistake, wasn't it?
Well, no. The president has no control over the decisions that other people make. He simply gave individuals an opportunity to achieve greatness. She could have been out there championing her community with the prison reform and everything the president is doing for the black community, but she chose to go a different route. The president is not responsible for others' reactions.
All right, Katrina Pearson, appreciate you coming in with that new information.
Great to be here, Ed. Thanks.
All right. Our other top story tonight, the FBI agent who sent anti-Trump text messages, even though he was a big part of the Clinton email probe and briefly served on Special Counsel Robert Mueller's Russia investigation, was fired today. Our correspondent Kristen Fisher is following the latest developments on Peter Strzok and what it all means. Good evening, Kristen.
Good evening, Ed. This is a moment that President Trump's been pushing for months. He accused now former FBI agent Peter Strzok of politicizing the FBI. Now Strzok's attorney is blaming his client's firing on the exact same thing.
I don't think that you can rationally reach any conclusion other than it was political. It's difficult to believe, given the steady drumbeat of texts demonizing Pete from the president and all the calls on Capitol Hill by Republicans for Pete to be fired, that didn't play a role in the Bureau's ultimate decision.
After the Inspector General report came out in June criticizing Strzok for sending those anti-Trump text messages, the FBI's Office of Professional Responsibility recommended that Strzok be suspended for 60 days and demoted, but not fired. Strzok's attorney is now accusing the deputy director of the FBI of overruling that recommendation and breaking with Bureau tradition.
Of course, his lawyer says that it was a railroad job. His only other option is to say, you know what, my client prejudged 2 major investigations. He made up his mind that Hillary Clinton was innocent before he interviewed her. He made up his mind that Donald Trump should be impeached before he bothered to interview him. And oh, by the way, he did a lot of this on the government phone, and he violated other FBI policy.
Well, President Trump celebrated the news on Twitter. Agent Peter Strzok was just fired from the FBI, finally, adding, based on the fact that Strzok was in charge of the witch hunt, will it be dropped? Is it a total hoax? No collusion, no obstruction. I just fight back. Strzok was removed from the special counsel's probe 1 year ago as soon as Mueller learned of those anti-Trump text messages. He's now at least the 6th senior FBI official to be fired, demoted, or to leave since the story broke. As for what Strzok will do next, will he speak out publicly like his former FBI colleague James Comey? Well, Strzok's attorney says right now he's mulling things over, but Ed, a GoFundMe page to help with his legal fees has already raised $80,000 in just 9 hours.
Kristen Fisher, appreciate your report tonight. For more on both of these big, high-profile firings dominating the news cycle, let's bring in tonight's panel. Democratic strategist Isaac Wright, former Deputy Assistant Attorney General in the Bush administration Tom Dupree, and senior columnist at townhall.com, Kurt Schlichter. We appreciate you all being here.
Good to be here.
Good evening. Thanks for having us.
Isaac, I want to start with you in the news we had from Katrina Pearson. I know a lot of people on the left have been really pumping up this book from Omarosa. A lot of the president's supporters are upset about it. There are growing contradictions in what she says.
Yeah, I mean, look, we sent essentially talk TV, reality TV, melodrama into the White House, and so what we see spewing out of the White House is talk TV, reality TV, melodrama. Some of the stuff has turned out to be true because she has tapes to back it up. Some of it seems farcical. I mean, a lot of it just seems like melodrama.
Yeah, Kurt, what do you make of the fact that Omarosa was also on MSNBC tonight suggesting at least, and we don't know what we can believe and not believe, that the special counsel Robert Mueller's office had contacted her at some point recently, and she said, look, I'm ready to talk.
Well, Omarosa sure knows her MSNBC audience. They'll eat that up, just like they ate up Michael Cohen and Stormy Daniels and every other loser, weirdo, and mutation who came along trying to undo Donald Trump. Omarosa is a clown show. She's a train wreck. And I don't understand why anyone's giving her the time of day. I certainly can't imagine anybody's buying her book. But good luck, Omarosa. Well, you don't seem to have much of a future doing anything else at this rate.
I want to bring Tom in, but briefly, Kurt, you call her a clown show. This is a clown show hired by the President of the United States, right?
Statistically, sometimes you're going to hire people who don't work out. And boy, she didn't work out. You know, Donald Trump's appointing thousands of people to offices. You're going to get some losers. And in Omarosa, he did.
Tom, I don't want to necessarily bring you into the political clown show. You come on and talk about judiciary issues and the Justice Department. There's a serious matter here, though, about some of the tapes that she's recorded. I've been getting a lot of emails today from our viewers saying, number one, taping the president. Is there anything illegal about that? It might at least be unethical, but is it illegal? But maybe more importantly, with General Kelly being in the Situation Room, a secure place, her bringing in a phone and recording the chief of staff. Is there a problem there? Is there a law that may have been broken? Is there a national security guideline that she may have broken?
Well, certainly as far as national security policies, guidelines, absolutely she violated a bunch of them. I mean, for one thing, in the Situation Room, they have signs that you're not allowed to bring in personal electronic devices precisely to prevent this sort of thing. She obviously also breached just general ethical rules. I mean, when you're working in a White House, you don't surreptitiously record the chief of staff. Whether or not she faces legal jeopardy, I think, is an open question. I can't say I'm aware of a federal statute that prohibits exactly what she did. But look, there's no question that she has total disregard for policy, total disregard for ethics, and I can't imagine that very many people are going to view her as a particularly credible witness at this point.
I want to move on to Peter Strzok, but I see, Isaac, that you were trying to, you were champing at the bit there as Kurt talked about the clown show. I'll give you a quick moment as a Democrat.
I mean, this whole White House is a clown show, and to Kurt's point, I mean, that's the great irony of all this is that Omarosa then came out and complained, you know, she was shocked that Donald Trump would lie and attack her on Twitter. I mean, if Donald Trump has shown anything, it is that he has a propensity to lie and to resort to cheap, classless attacks. How was she shocked
That's your view.
This?
Let me jump in here and get to Peter Strzok. Kurt, let's turn it to Peter Strzok, because you had all these text messages. You know, I can smell the Trump supporters in Walmart. You know, we've got to prevent him from being elected. There's been a whole trail of text messages raising questions. What took so long for him to be fired?
Who knows? I think this Department of Justice doesn't understand who they work for, which is the American people. You cannot have a senior FBI official out there unilaterally deciding that he wants to undo the effect of an election. This guy's cheating on his wife on the job. He's texting all the time. My 14-year-old daughter couldn't text that much. And he's incompetent. He's prejudging and ruining investigations. The Hillary investigation and the Trump investigation. They couldn't have done anything but fire this guy. They should have done it months ago.
Tom, final word. Where are we in all of this? You saw Rudy Giuliani on Fox and Friends and on Hannity tonight as well, saying this is not just about the investigation of the president, but it's about the investigation of the investigators. And Rudy Giuliani on Fox tonight called for a second special counsel.
Yeah, look, I think that today's firing, or the firing that was revealed today, I don't think it's going to have a dramatic impact on the way people perceive either Strzok or the Mueller investigation. I mean, look, this guy was up on the Hill testifying. I think most Americans made up their mind based on what they saw on the screen, how he presented, and most importantly, what he did. I think that this will provide additional fuel for people who want to say that, look, there was a lot of corruption behind the scenes, and I agree there were a lot of very unusual things, to say the least, going on behind the scenes in 2016. So I think that this is just going to continue the debate. I'm glad that Peter Strzok at least will be out of the picture for the time being.
And he was removed a year ago. Let's remember, he was removed a year ago from the Mueller investigation. If anything, that speaks to the integrity of the investigation and why it's so serious, why it's brought 35 indictments, 5 guilty pleas, and 1 prison sentence already.
I don't think
this guy was kicked off a year ago in order to help make sure that this was beyond reproach, beyond question.
Isaac, Tom, Kurt, appreciate you coming in, dealing with these two big breaking stories.
Thank you so much.
Thanks, Ed.
Meanwhile, breaking news straight ahead on Pastor Brunson, still imprisoned in Turkey. Tonight, the White House National Security Advisor John Bolton is launching a new push for his release. We're hearing from Brunson family attorney Jay Sekulow as Republicans turn up the heat on a U.S. ally.
We're not going to have a normal relationship with Turkey until they let Pastor Brunson out.
Meanwhile, the president gives the troops a pay raise and has a little fun doing it.
Does anybody not want it? Please raise your hand. What's going on here? Are these real patriots? I don't know, General.
But the bill he signed is deadly serious. $717 billion to build up the military, the president says, like never before. You see him there, retired General Jack Keane. He's going to break down the details next. Tonight, a big strategic shift to tell you about from the Defense Department when it comes to tackling threats from Russia and China. Correspondent Brian Yennis is at Fort Drum, where President Trump signed the new defense spending bill, and it's big.
After years of devastating cuts, we're now rebuilding our military like we never have before.
The 10th Mountain Division, the most deployed Army division since 9/11, welcomed the President and Vice President to Fort Drum Army Base in New York with a military demonstration. A celebration of sorts before the President signed into law the John S. McCain National Defense Authorization Act, a $716 billion defense spending budget for 2019 that promises to boost the military. Under this bill, the U.S. military will add 15,000 troops to its ranks, and troops will get a 2.6% raise, the largest pay bump in a decade. Billions will be invested in new weapons, including 77 new F-35 Joint Strike Fighter aircrafts, 13 new battleships, nearly $1 billion to update our nuclear capabilities, research artificial intelligence, and create space defenses.
Every day the Army is fighting for us, and now we are fighting for you 100%.
The investments are being made to counter China, which has ramped up its military activity in the South China Sea. Under the act, the U.S. will now send more weapons to Taiwan, conduct new joint military exercises with Japan, Australia, and India, and tighten national security reviews to keep Chinese companies from stealing military and trade secrets. The bill is also tougher on Russia, sanctioning Russia's arms industry while sending $250 million worth of weapons to the Ukraine. Notably, the president chose not to mention Senator John McCain's name today. This act was named in his honor by his congressional colleagues as a thank you for his service. McCain is one of the most vocal critics of the president. Ed?
All right, Brian, we appreciate your report. A new push tonight, meanwhile, from the National Security Advisor at the White House, John Bolton, to try and force the release of detained American pastor Andrew Brunson tonight, as sanctions appear to take a bite out of Turkey's fragile economy. Our correspondent Garrett Tenney is live in Washington following this developing story. Good evening, Garrett.
Ed, good evening to you. The White House has really been ramping up the pressure on Turkey this last month, especially both politically and economically, to release Pastor Andrew Brunson, and those efforts appear to be having at least some effect. Today, as Turkey's financial markets plummeted and its currencies fell to record lows, the country's ambassador to the U.S. requested a meeting with National Security Advisor John Bolton to discuss the detention of Pastor Brunson and relations between our two countries. The White House has been pretty tight-lipped about any conversations surrounding Brunson, so it's not clear what kind of progress, if any, was made in today's talks. But Jay Sekulow, who represents the Brunson family and is also one of the president's personal attorneys, tells Fox News, quote, "We are working with the president, vice president, and the Secretary of State, as well as members of Congress. The president and his team remain committed to securing the release of Pastor Brunson, and we remain hopeful that will occur soon." Today's meeting is the first we know of between the two countries since President Trump announced plans Friday to double tariffs on Turkish steel and aluminum over Brunson's detainment. Turkish President Recep Tayyip Erdogan is not backing down, though, and on Sunday he accused the U.S. of committing economic warfare and vowed not to give in to U.S. pressure.
You are attempting to sacrifice your relationship with 81 million people for a pastor with ties to terror organizations, but we will do it as law dictates. You cannot simply make Turkey bow down by ordering it around.
Turkish authorities claim the 50-year-old American pastor is a spy who was working with terrorist groups in a failed military coup to overthrow Turkey's government in 2016. White House officials call those allegations absurd and say the U.S. is prepared to slap Turkey with additional tariffs if Pastor Brunson is not released. Ed?
All right, Garrett, appreciate that report. Will Turkey, which is supposed to be a key ally, bend under the pressure? Retired four-star general, Fox News senior strategic analyst, retired General Jack Keane is here to weigh in tonight. General, I covered Barack Obama. I went back tonight, looked at an interview he did in 2016 where he said, look, Turkey's taking some worrisome steps, but they're still a key NATO ally. What is the state of the relationship tonight?
Oh, this relationship's been strained for some time. It really began heavy in 2016 when the coup started against Erdogan, and not a single country from the West and NATO, to include the United States, came came out to support him. And that's because he's been moving towards an authoritarian regime, stripping the people of democratic values, becoming a strongman in a sense, and aligning himself with Russia and Iran in Syria. So we have had some major issues with Erdogan for some time.
And this idea that Pastor Brunson has terrorist ties seems absurd, obviously, as the White House says, and is absurd. Do you think this pressure, especially the tariffs at a time when the Turkish economy is in a precarious position, is it going to have an impact? Are they going to give in?
Yeah, I think they will. Listen, the reason why Pastor Brunson is in prison is because he's a U.S. citizen residing in Turkey, and we have a Turkish citizen residing in the United States who Erdogan believes was the catalyst for the coup. His name is Fethullah Gulen, and we have no evidence to support that, so therefore we're not extraditing him to Turkey, and that is why we're in the pickle we're in. Listen, Erdogan started this financial crisis himself when he expanded operations inside of Turkey, creating a lot of debt, and also refused to deal with low interest rates. Those interest rates had to rise. Now, we have exacerbated it, to be sure, but we're not the cause of it. I think where we're heading here is a diplomatic solution for sure, because Erdogan has to avoid default. He's got a huge pressure on himself. He is stubborn to a fault, that's for sure. But at the end of the day, I think we'll see Pastor Brunson being released.
So as you look around the world, this president campaigned as somebody who was going to get tougher, not just with foes, but allies sometimes when they needed tough medicine. You look at what's happening in Turkey, then you look at a foe like Iran, the pressure from this president on them, and you look at this defense bill today, over $700 billion to rebuild the military. What stands out to you in terms of what will have the most impact?
Well, first of all, we're growing the military again in its size. We got to a 70-year low with this military, which is absolutely stunning given all of our world responsibilities. Second thing is you've heard commanders after commanders go before the Congress and tell them the serious readiness problem. For our view is what that means is a lack of flying hours, a lack of repair parts for our equipment, so much so we're borrowing equipment from other vehicles, and a lack of training time for our troops. We saw ships banging into other ships as a result of a lack of training and preparation for our sailors at sea. That's going to begin to get fixed. And then, as you showed in the introduction, we're going to capitalize our investment accounts in a significant way to buy more ships, more airplanes, more helicopters, ground fighting vehicles, missiles, etc. All of that has got to be done, and thankfully we're going to give the troops a significant pay raise, for the first time in almost a decade.
Wow. General Jack Keane, obviously the men and women in uniform who serve so bravely for us need that. We appreciate you breaking it all down for us.
Yeah, good talking to you.
All right. Thanks, General. We also have breaking news tonight in the trial of the Muslim extremists running a New Mexico compound, allegedly to train kids for acts of violence in schools. Plus, stick around. We're live on the ground with our chief congressional correspondent, Mike Emanuel. He's in Minnesota. That primary there has been rocked by allegations of domestic violence against the top Democrat, Keith Ellison. There are new developments tonight. Straight ahead. And President Trump weighs in on Wisconsin's primary by mentioning a boycott against the state. Tomorrow, voters head to the polls in Wisconsin, Minnesota, Connecticut, and Vermont for primary elections. Tonight, Congressman Keith Ellison, the co-chair of the Democratic National Committee, is denying allegations he emotionally and physically abused an ex-girlfriend. Some are claiming these allegations are politically motivated. Our chief political correspondent, Mike Emanuel, is live in Minnesota ahead of the state's primary. Good evening, Mike.
Well, good evening, Ed. The stunning allegations of abuse are threatening a rising star of the Democratic Party who's facing a primary election to be this state's Attorney General. Keith Ellison is vice chair of the Democratic National Committee. He's been a member of Congress since 2007, and Ellison is considered to be the likely frontrunner of 5 Democrats running to be Minnesota's Attorney General. Over the weekend, the son of his ex-girlfriend accused Ellison of abusing his mother and claims there is video evidence. His ex-girlfriend, Karen Monahan, backed up the son's claims, calling it narcissist abuse, saying, quote, the pathological lying, cheating, smearing my name, and seeking validation and sympathy from the various females he was preying on kept getting more and more frequent. Ellison put out a statement last night saying, quote, Karen and I were in a long-term relationship which ended in 2016, and I still care deeply for her well-being. This video does not exist because I never behaved in this way, and any characterization otherwise is false. One of the other candidates in this race is calling for a full criminal investigation and says Ellison should step aside.
This is serious domestic charges. He serves as the number 2 person in the Democratic National Committee. Frankly, I think he should resign from that position. I don't think he should be up there until these allegations are resolved.
The timing of this is obviously deeply troubling for Ellison, coming out the weekend before the Minnesota primary, and some suggest Ellison is not likely to get the benefit of the doubt.
Voters, I'm sure, will have a lot of questions about whether these allegations are true and the timing of the allegations, but anything involving sexual assault is going to have a big impact in a Democratic primary.
And there is not much time for this to be vetted or to play out before Minnesota voters go to the polls tomorrow. Ed?
All right, Mike Emanuel, maybe we can call Main Street Mike out there for us reporting tonight. We appreciate it. In Wisconsin, Democrats must hold Senator Tammy Baldwin's seat to have a chance at winning the Senate this fall. Our correspondent Peter Ducey is live in Milwaukee tonight with more details. Good evening, Peter.
Good evening. Good evening, Ed. The big fight here tomorrow is to see which Republican is going to face in November the incumbent Democrat Tammy Baldwin, who is seen as vulnerable because back in 2016, this state was won by President Trump. So a few hours ago today here in Wisconsin, the congressman retiring from Wisconsin's 1st district, which also has a primary tomorrow, came to campaign for his pick, State Senator Leah Vukmir. Paul Ryan lauded her as having the highest odds of flipping the seat, and part of Vukmir's last-minute pitch to voters was to look past the primary to the general election, seeking to define the Democratic Party, which lacks a clear national leader, by linking the Democratic incumbent to a Democratic socialist.
She stands with, of all people, Bernie Sanders in calling for single-payer government-run health care.
But Vukmir trails businessman turned Marine Kevin Nicholson in a head-to-head fundraising fight. Nicholson is the favorite of Senators Ted Cruz and Mike Lee. Outside money is now pouring into what could be the most expensive Badger State Senate primary ever. And Nicholson is raking in cash, even though back in college, he was the president of the College Democrats of America.
Conservative principles and policies and values actually work. They empower people. They give them an opportunity to be successful. And look, I didn't get that when I was 21, but I sure as heck get it now.
President Trump has not endorsed anyone in the Senate primary, but he has weighed in on a very touchy subject in Wisconsin, a possible boycott of Wisconsin's own Harley Davidson if they wind up reacting to new tariffs by setting up shop elsewhere. So the president tweeted this: many Harley Davidson owners plan to boycott the company if manufacturing moves overseas. Great. Most other companies are coming in our direction, including Harley competitors. A really bad move. U.S. will soon have a level playing field or better. Harley's headquarters are here in Milwaukee. Leah Vukmir, running for the Senate, says she doesn't think they're going to wind up leaving Wisconsin. Kevin Nicholson, also running for the Senate, says that he doesn't think a boycott would be necessary, and the incumbent governor, Scott Walker, who is expected to sail to victory in his primary yesterday, says that he does not want a boycott, no matter what the president says. Ed?
All right, Primary Pete. Peter Ducey, appreciate you staying live for us tonight. We'll see you tomorrow night, buddy. All right, new tonight on the extremist Muslim compound in New Mexico, where authorities allege ringleaders were training kids for violent acts against the government, including maybe even school shootings. The judge says the 5 defendants can be released on $25,000 bond each because the state did not prove they would be a danger to the community or the 11 children found at the compound. Defense attorneys focusing for their part on what they called a double standard at play, alleging that if the suspects were white and Christian rather than black and Muslim, they might not be in court at all. The president is not the only one who has a problem with the press, apparently.
I know NBC has been on a jag of this. This is one of their priorities, to undermine my prospects as Speaker.
Fresh new attacks on the media coming from Democrats like Nancy Pelosi and Bill de Blasio? Plus, should Democrats be worried about a new poll showing party voters are supporting socialism? We discuss it all with Governor Mike Huckabee. He's up next. Democrats sounding a little upset with the media. That story tops our Real News Roundup. Hours after saying he believes in a free press, New York City Mayor Bill de Blasio reportedly had his bodyguards physically remove a credentialed New York Post reporter who tried to ask him, yes, a press question about his administration's many meetings with lobbyists. De Blasio also continuing to take shots at Fox News.
So you'd rather not have the New York Post or Fox News exist?
Look, it's a free country. I'm saying because they exist, we've been changed for the worst.
Ooh, for the worst. Meanwhile, House Speaker Nancy Pelosi is blaming the media for the divide over her leading the party.
I know NBC has been on a jag of this. This is one of their priorities to undermine my prospects as Speaker.
Ooh, and tonight, more evidence of the Democratic Party's shift to the left. According to a new Gallup poll, Democrats view socialism more positively than they do capitalism. 57% hold a positive view of socialism. Only 47% view capitalism positively, which is lower than any of Gallup's previous 3 measures of the same poll. Let's discuss it with the former Arkansas governor, Fox News contributor Mike Huckabee. Good evening, sir.
Good evening, Ed. Great to be with you.
What does that poll tell you?
You know, when I'm thinking about this, the whole idea about socialism and the people who support it, there's only one group of people who support socialism over capitalism. They're the people who don't get up until noon, don't wake to an alarm clock, basically the people who don't work for a living. They love socialism. But people who work and who have ambition, who want to be able to make something of themselves, they realize what a desperately horrible situation it is. And anyone who doesn't believe it, take a look at Venezuela. They went from a wealthy country with great resources, they got socialism, and now the people there can't even get toilet paper. So the Democrat slogan this year, vote for us, we'll wipe you out.
They're being direct about it. Vox is a left-leaning publication. They had a story published this week saying that some people in the Democratic Party want socialism but may not want to pay the tab. They added up so-called free tuition, college tuition, and Medicare for all. They say, Governor, it would cost $218 trillion over the next 30 years.
It doesn't matter what the price tag is, it's unaffordable. It's unsustainable. Margaret Thatcher said it best in the often quoted statement. She said that reason socialism doesn't work is sooner or later you run out of other people's money. That's why it doesn't work. It's never worked. There's not one place on earth where it has been effective and it has been able to be sustained. It can't be. It's a false system. It's based on basically a godless idea that people will just want to sit around and work hard and give it all away to somebody who didn't work hard, and that's not the way the human body, the human mind is hardwired.
And we see Nancy Pelosi, someone who I'm sure you believed in recent years was far left, is now having troubles with the far left, and you've got over 50 Democrats, either incumbents or candidates for office, saying they won't support her if the Democrats win the majority. So much so, she's so discombobulated, it seems right now. She was going after NBC over the weekend and saying, you guys are trying to stir up trouble.
You know, when you're a Democrat and you've lost NBC, you've completely lost the left wing of your party. And that is an astonishing thing when she is upset that NBC has taken her on. That shows you how far not only most of the Democrats have gone, but how far NBC has gone. And they're out there on the edge. And Nancy Pelosi is wondering, what happened? Well, they've left her.
Governor, I noticed on Twitter today, can't believe everything you see there, that it's your daughter's birthday, Sarah Huckabee Sanders. What'd you tell her today?
Well, I just wished her a happy birthday. She was born on Friday the 13th, and I told her it was one of the luckiest and most wonderful days of my life when she was born, and she's been a delight. And I hope she's had a good birthday and didn't get thrown out of any restaurant today.
Oh, she's been in the middle of a lot of controversy, but that's one proud papa. We appreciate you coming in.
You bet, Ed. Thanks.
All right, thanks. You've heard of storm chasers. What about fire chasers who fly into the smoke to help you? That is next.